The capital world of Ephelos did not look like a planet. From the viewport of the descending transport, it looked like a jewel carved by a mad god. The surface was entirely covered in city sprawls of white marble and gold, broken only by oceans that had been dyed a vibrant, aesthetic teal. Orbital rings encircled the equator, glowing with the soft blue light of a trillion windows. It was a paradise of technology and art. But as the transport ship descended past the cloud layer, the illusion fractured. Elias Thorne looked out the reinforced transparasteel window. He saw the layers. The top spires were bathed in sunlight, connected by crystalline bridges where the elite lived. But as the ship went lower, the light faded. They descended into the shadows, down past the commercial districts, down past the industrial fabricators, down into the foundation tier. Here, the air was recycled and stale. The buildings were gray durasteel blocks. This was where the machinery of the Empire lived, and it was where the gladiators died. "Prepare for docking," the pilot's voice announced. Ludus of the Iron Will. The ship touched down on a private landing pad inside a massive fortress. The walls were 30 feet high, topped with energy fields. This wasn't a prison, it was a bank vault for flesh. The ramp lowered. "Move it." Off the boat. Guards in full riot gear, black armor, faceless helmets, swarmed the ramp. Electric cattle prods crackled in the dim light. Elias stepped off, flanked by Kale and Jax. He took a deep breath. The air smelled of ozone, antiseptic, and expensive artificial pheromones meant to keep the populace calm. They were herded into a central courtyard. It was a vast sand-floored arena used for training. Standing in the center was the master of the Ludus, Vex. The Lanista was a sight to behold. He was a Chitonian, a four-armed, insectoid humanoid with an exoskeleton like polished obsidian. He wore a toga of red silk that draped loosely over his armored frame. He stood perfectly still, his four hands clasped behind his back. The new arrivals were lined up for inspection. There were 20 of them, a mix of species bought from the outer rim. Vex walked down the line. He moved with a clicking, jerky grace. He stopped in front of a massive orc warrior. He poked the orc's bicep with a clawed finger. "Too much fat," Vex clicked. "Put him on the starvation diet." He moved to a slender, bird-like avian. "Hollow bones. Useless for melee. Send him to the beast pens as bait." Then Vex stopped in front of Elias. The Lanista looked up. Elias was a head taller. Vex's compound eyes, faceted and glittering, scanned Elias from boots to hairline. "The human," Vex whispered. His voice was a dry rasp, like dead leaves blowing over stone. "Moloch's prize." "My name is Elias," he said steadily. Vex struck. It was a blur. Two of Vex's arms shot out. One backhanded Elias across the face. The other punched him in the gut. It happened in a fraction of a second. Elias staggered back, wheezing, tasting blood. "I did not ask for your name," Vex said, his voice unchanged. "Names are earned in the sand. Until then, you are meat." Vex turned to address the group, spreading all four arms wide. "Welcome to the Iron Will. You are the property of the High Council. You have one purpose, to entertain. You will fight. You will bleed. And most of you will die." Vex pointed to the high walls. "Do not try to escape. The collars on your necks contain a micro-explosive charge. If you cross the perimeter, your head becomes pink mist." Jax whimpered, clutching his neck. But Vex continued, "If you fight well, if you win, you will have glory. You will have women. You will have wine. And perhaps, if the Emperor smiles upon you, you will have freedom." Vex looked back at Elias. "Training begins in 1 hour. Survive the first day, and I will feed you. Fail, and I feed you to the hounds." The training arena was a chaotic nightmare. It was a free-for-all drill. The floor was covered in sand that shifted underfoot. Wooden weapons, heavy clubs, dull swords, and staves were scattered around. "Begin," Vex shouted from the observation balcony. The intent was to weed out the weak. The gladiators turned on each other instantly. The massive orc charged a smaller reptile, swinging a club like a maniac. A pair of agile knife fighters circled each other. It was a brawl. There was no tactic, only instinct. "Jax, stay behind me," Elias ordered. "Kale, right flank." Elias didn't charge. He stepped back toward the wall. He grabbed a large rectangular shield and a weighted wooden sword. Shields up, Elias roared. Kale, the Togarian giant, grabbed a tower shield intended for a heavy mech suit. He slammed it into the sand next to Elias. Jax, terrified but obedient, grabbed a smaller buckler and crouched behind their legs. They formed a small, tight triangle in the corner of the arena. A group of 3 insectoid warriors saw them. They chittered, sensing easy prey in the corner. They charged, their multiple limbs flailing with wooden daggers. "Hold," Elias said calmly. The insects hit the shields. Thud. The impact was heavy, but the shield wall held. Elias braced his shoulder against the wood, absorbing the kinetic energy. Push. Elias and Kale surged forward in unison. The sudden kinetic shift knocked the insects off balance. They stumbled back. Strike. Elias thrust his wooden sword through the gap in the shields. He didn't swing wildly. He thrust efficiently, aiming for the solar plexus. Crack. The lead insect doubled over, gasping. Kale swung his massive shield edge on, clipping the second attacker in the head. The creature went down cold. The third attacker hesitated. He looked at the wall of wood and muscle. He looked at Elias's calm, cold eyes. He retreated, looking for easier targets. "What is this?" The voice came from the balcony. Vex leaned over the railing, his compound eyes twitching. He had seen strength before. He had seen savagery. But he had never seen discipline on the first day. Slaves didn't work together. Slaves fought for scraps. "Stop," Vex ordered. A sonic siren blasted, freezing the combatants in place. Vex jumped from the balcony. He landed in the sand with a soft thud, 30 feet down. He walked toward Elias. The other gladiators parted ways. "You do not fight," Vex clicked, circling the trio. "You, turtle." "We survive," Elias said, keeping his shield up. "A dead gladiator entertains no one." Vex tapped the shield with a claw. "This is cowardly. The crowd wants blood. They want motion." "The crowd wants a story," Elias corrected. "Savages dying in the mud is a boring story. A legion that cannot be broken? That is a story." Vex paused. He looked at the unconscious insect warrior on the ground. He looked at Jax, who was alive only because of the shield wall. "Alekion vet mused." He snatched a spear from a nearby rack. In a blur of motion, he thrust it at Jax's face. Elias moved instantly. He didn't block it. He parried it, deflecting the tip into the sand, and stepped in, placing his wooden sword against Vex's throat. Vex froze. The wooden tip was pressing against his neck armor. For a moment, the entire arena held its breath. A slave had just threatened the Lanista. Vex slowly lowered the spear. His mandibles clicked, a sound that might have been a laugh. "Interesting," Vex whispered. He pushed the sword away. "You wish to fight as a unit? Very well. But know this, human. The arena is not a battlefield. It is a theater. If your legion is boring, I will send in the cyborgs to butcher you slowly." Vex turned to the guards. "Get this man a real sword, and get the cat some armor that fits. I want to see what they can do." Elias lowered his weapon. He looked at Kale. The Togarian grinned, showing a mouth full of fangs. "We are not dead yet, little brother," Kale grumbled. "No," Elias said, looking at the high walls of the fortress. "We're just getting started." The sun over the capital city was artificial, a massive orbital mirror that reflected light down onto the surface. It meant the heat in the training pits was constant, unrelenting, and precise. Again, Elias roared. He stood in the center of the sand, sweat dripping from his chin. Around him stood his ragtag recruits. It had been 3 weeks since Vex had authorized the formation of the squad, and it was going poorly. "You are stepping on my tail, you green idiot," Nyx hissed. Nyx was a Salarian, a slender, amphibious creature with large, black eyes and skin that secreted a slippery mucus when he was stressed. He was fast, brilliant, and physically fragile. "I didn't see your tail," Grom grunted. Grom was an orc. He was 7 feet of green muscle, tusks, and bad attitude. He held a wooden club that weighed as much as Nyx. "Stop bickering," Elias ordered, stepping between them. "Reset the line." "This is pointless," Grom growled, throwing his club into the sand. "Orcs fight alone. Orcs fight for glory. Standing in a line is for cowards." Elias walked up to the massive orc. Grom towered over him, but Elias didn't back down. Glory, Elias asked quietly. Tell me, Grom, how long is the average lifespan of an orc in the arena? Grom shrugged. 3 matches. Maybe 4. 4 matches, Elias repeated. And then you die. You rot. And the crowd forgets your name before they finish their drinks. Elias turned to the group. There were 6 of them now. Elias, Jax, Kale, Nyx, Grom, and a 4-armed insectoid swordmaster named Click. The Synod wants you to die, Elias said. They buy you cheap, use you up, and throw you away. Fighting alone is exactly what they want. He picked up a heavy tower shield. But a phalanx, Elias said, planting the shield in the sand, is not about fighting. It is about geometry. It is about physics. If we lock shields, we are not 6 individuals. We are a tank. He looked at Grom. Pick up the shield, Grom. The orc hesitated, then grunted and grabbed the massive slab of iron. Kale, on his right, Elias ordered. Nyx, behind Grom with the spear. Click, flank guard. Jax, center with me. They shuffled into position. It was clumsy, but they formed a wall. Vex is sending in the drone swarms today, Elias warned. Stun setting, but high voltage. If the line breaks, you fry. A buzzer sounded. From the far wall, ports opened. A swarm of 20 combat drones buzzed out. They looked like angry hornets made of chrome. Shields up. Elias shouted. The drones dove. Zap, zap, zap. Bolts of electricity slammed into the iron shields. Sparks showered down. Hold. Elias gritted his teeth as the impact shuddered through the line. Grom roared, trying to swing his shield like a weapon. No. Elias grabbed the orc's harness. Stay tight. Let them break against us. The drones swarmed, looking for a gap. They buzzed around the flanks. Click. High guard. The insectoid warrior raised his 4 swords, creating a spinning fan of steel above their heads. He deflected 2 drones, sending them spinning into the sand. Nyx. Thrust. From the safety of the shield wall, the Salarian thrust his long spear through the gap between Grom and Kale. He skewered a low-flying drone. Huh. Nyx chirped. Target neutralized. Advance. Elias ordered. Step. 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 They moved. It wasn't graceful. They stepped on each other's feet. But the wall moved forward. The drones couldn't find an opening. They bounced off the shields, frustrated by the solid defense. They reached the far wall of the arena. The buzzer sounded again. The drones deactivated and fell to the ground. Silence. The gladiators lowered their shields. They were panting, sweating, and smelling of ozone. But they weren't burned. Grom looked at his shield. It was scorched black by a dozen hits that would have stopped his heart. I am not hurt, Grom murmured, sounding surprised. Because the man next to you took the hit, Elias said, clapping Kale on the shoulder. And you took the hit for Nyx. Elias looked at them. They weren't just slaves anymore. They were beginning to understand. This is the doctrine of steel, Elias said. Iron breaks. Steel bends, but it returns to shape. Together, we are steel. High above on the balcony, Vex watched. He tapped his mandibles. They are surviving, Vex whispered to his assistant. Schedule them for the mid-tier games. Let us see if their geometry holds up against lions. The sparring match 3 days later went wrong. It was supposed to be a routine drill against a gravity bot, a machine that manipulated local gravity fields to crush its opponents. Elias had moved to shove Jax out of the way of a gravity well. He succeeded, but the edge of the field clipped him. It felt like being hit by a freight train. His armor crumpled. His left arm snapped. He was thrown 20 feet into a stone pillar. The world went black. He woke to the smell of lavender and antiseptic. It was wrong. The slave pits smelled of rust and blood. This smell was expensive. Elias opened his eyes. He was lying on a bio bed that hummed softly. The pain in his arm was gone, replaced by a dull numbness. The room was white, clean, silent. You are awake. The voice was melodic, soft like water, flowing over smooth stones. Elias tried to sit up. A hand gently pushed him back down. Lie still, Gladiator. The bone knitting is only 80% complete. Elias focused his eyes. Standing over him was a woman. She was highborn. He knew it instantly by the robes, white silk embroidered with gold thread. Her skin was a pale, luminescent violet. Her hair fell in a cascade of silver down her back. But it was her eyes that held him. They were deep purple, flecked with gold, and they held no fear. She wore the crest of the royal house. Elias stiffened. I am in the presence of royalty. I should be on the floor. You should be in a coma, she said, checking a holographic display above his bed. Your radius and ulna were shattered. Most men would have gone into shock. I've had worse, Elias grunted. Where am I? The High Medical Wing, she said. I am Lady Valeriana, High Healer of the Games. Valeriana. Elias tested the name. It sounded familiar. The Archon's sister. She paused. Her hand hovered over the controls. Yes, though I prefer to be defined by my work, not my bloodline. She picked up a scanner and ran it over his arm. I watched your training, she said softly. The Phalanx. It is an ancient human tactic, is it not? It is, Elias said, watching her. She wasn't looking at him with disgust. She was looking at him with curiosity. Why teach them, she asked. Why teach orcs and Salarians to fight like humans? They are your competition. They are my men, Elias said. In the vanguard, we didn't care about species. We cared about the person on your left and right. If they stand, you stand. Valeriana stopped. She looked at him. The vanguard, she whispered. You are Commander Thorne, the ghost of Ethelgard. Elias tensed. That man is dead. I am just a gladiator named Elias. No, she said, shaking her head. She reached up and unclasped the medical veil she wore, revealing her full face. She was breathtakingly beautiful, but there was a sadness in the set of her jaw. My brother, he told the council that the vanguard died due to a rebel ambush. He hailed you as martyrs. He lied, Elias said coldly. He bombarded his own position. He wiped us out because he was afraid we were becoming too popular. Valeriana looked down. I know. The admission hung in the air. You know, Elias asked. My brother believes that fear is the only currency of rule, Valeriana said, her voice trembling slightly. He believes the galaxy is a chaotic beast that must be caged. But I see what you are doing in the pits, Elias. She stepped closer. She placed her hand on his chest, over his heart. Her palm was warm. You are showing them something else. You are showing them loyalty, mercy, things my brother thinks are weaknesses. They are dangerous things to show in an arena, Elias warned her. Perhaps, she smiled faintly, but perhaps danger is what we need. She pulled a small metal injector from her tray. This will finish the bone healing. It will hurt. Do it, Elias said. She pressed the device to his arm. He hissed through his teeth, his muscles seizing. She didn't pull away. She kept her hand on his shoulder, grounding him. You are building fire, Elias, she whispered close to his ear. Be careful. My brother will try to extinguish it. But if you can keep it burning, there are those in the High Council who would welcome the warmth. She pulled back, her face returning to the mask of a professional healer. You are cleared for combat in 2 days. Do not break my work. She turned to leave. My lady, Elias called out. She stopped at the door. Thank you. She looked back over her shoulder. For a second, the healer was gone, and just a woman remained. Strength and honor, Commander. The door hissed shut. Elias lay back on the pillows. He looked at his healed arm. He could still feel the warmth of her hand on his chest. He had expected to find only enemies in the capital. He hadn't expected to find an ally in the house of the enemy. And he certainly hadn't expected her to know the motto of the vanguard. Strength and honor. The game had just become much more complicated. The Arena of Tears was named not for the sorrow of the losers, but for the salt spray of the artificial ocean that bordered one side of the stadium. It was a mid-tier coliseum, holding 50,000 spectators, mostly from the merchant and soldier castes. Elias stood in the staging tunnel. The air here was damp and cool. Remember the drill, Elias said, his voice low. He looked at his team. They were a strange sight. Grom, the massive green-skinned orc, held a shield that looked like a bulkhead door. Nyx, the slender Salarian, twirled a telescopic energy spear. Kale, the scarred tiger man, tested the edge of his axe. Jax stood in the center, holding a pulse rifle that had been modified to fire non-lethal, but agonizing shock bolts. We are the Iron Legion, Elias said. We do not break. "We do not break," the team echoed. The heavy gates ground open. The light hit them. It was blinding. The roar of the crowd was a physical wave of sound, shaking the dust from the tunnel ceiling. And now, the announcer's voice boomed from the floating speakers. The trash of the outer rim. The mongrel squad. The crowd booed and threw debris, cups, food wrappers, into the arena. Elias marched them out. He didn't look at the crowd. He scanned the terrain. It was a simulated ruin. Broken stone pillars, waist-high walls, and sand. Lots of sand. Across the arena, the opposing gate opened. A low, mechanical growl echoed through the stadium. Releasing the beast pack. 6 shapes bounded out of the darkness. They were Psi-wolves. Biological bases, massive muscular canines, enhanced with hydraulic jaws, metal plating, and targeting optics in place of eyes. They moved with a terrifying mix of animal instinct and machine precision. Formation Delta. Elias ordered. Circle up. The Legion moved. It wasn't the clumsy shuffle of the training pit. It was sharp. Snap. Grom and Kale took the front, locking their massive shields together. Elias and the insectoid warrior, Click, covered the flanks. Nyx and Jax stayed in the protected center. The wolves charged. They didn't bark, they just accelerated, their metal claws tearing up the sand. Hold. Elias shouted. The alpha wolf leaped, aiming for Grom's throat. Now, Grom didn't cower. He stepped into the charge, slamming his shield rim upward. Clang. The metal shield met the metal jaw. The wolf was knocked backward, flipping in the air. Fire. Elias commanded. Jax popped up from behind the shield wall. He fired 3 rapid shots. Thwip, thwip, thwip. The shock bolts hit the alpha in its exposed belly. The creature convulsed, its nervous system overloaded, and crashed into the sand. Flankers. Left. 2 more wolves tried to circle the formation. Click was ready. His 4 arms moved in a blur, his dual swords weaving a net of steel. He sliced the hydraulic lines on one wolf's leg, sending it skidding into a pillar. Nyx. Reach. The Salarian thrust his spear through the gap in the shields, catching a 3rd wolf in the shoulder. It was a clinic. The crowd, who had been booing moments ago, went quiet. They were used to seeing chaotic slaughters. They were used to seeing gladiators run and scream. They had never seen a machine. The Legion moved like a grinder. Step by step, they pushed the wolves back. They didn't chase. They didn't break rank. They just expanded their zone of control. Within 5 minutes, 5 wolves were down, disabled, twitching, or unconscious. Only the alpha remained. It had recovered from the shock bolts. It stood alone in the center of the arena, snarling, oil dripping from its broken jaw. Grom raised his club to crush it. Hold. Elias ordered. It is broken. Grom shouted, bloodlust in his eyes. Kill it. Stand down, Grom. Elias barked. That is an order. The orc hesitated. He looked at Elias, then lowered his club, grumbling. Elias stepped out from the shield wall. He walked toward the alpha wolf. The crowd gasped. Was he crazy? The wolf crouched, ready to spring. But it was hurt. Its sensors were damaged. It whined, a sound that was more animal than machine. Elias stopped 5 feet away. He sheathed his sword. He looked up at the announcer's box. Then he looked at the crowd. It is beaten. Elias shouted, his voice amplified by the stadium acoustics. There is no honor in killing the broken. He turned his back on the wolf. Legion, form up. To the gate. The team fell in behind him. They marched toward the exit, shields on their backs. The wolf didn't attack. It limped away into the shadows. For a moment, there was silence. Then a single voice in the crowd shouted, Iron Saint. Then another, Saint, Saint, Saint. The chanting grew until the ground shook. They weren't cheering for blood. They were cheering for something they hadn't seen in the arena in a generation. Mercy. Elias walked into the dark tunnel, his face grim. He knew what he had just done. He had won the crowd, but he had also painted a target on his back. High Archon Xylar sat in his private sanctum at the pinnacle of the diamond spire. The room was a masterpiece of luxury, with floors made of floating glass that looked down upon the city 3 miles below. In the center of the room, a massive hologram played a loop of the fight. It showed Elias sheathing his sword. It showed him turning his back on the beast. Turn it off, Xylar whispered. General Krell, commander of the Imperial Guard, deactivated the hologram. The crowd is agitated, Archon, Krell said, shifting uncomfortably in his armor. Sales of the Iron Legion merchandise have tripled in the last hour. The lower castes are calling him a hero. Xylar stood up and walked to the window. He smoothed the front of his silk robes. He is not a hero, Xylar said softly. He is a glitch. A variable I failed to delete. Shall I have him eliminated in the cells? Krell suggested. A toxin in his food? A malfunction in his collar? No, Xylar spun around, his eyes flashing with gold fire. Think, Krell. If he dies in a cell, he becomes a martyr. The saint who was murdered by the jealous empire. The slums will riot. The mines will stop producing. Xylar paced the room. We cannot kill the man. We must kill the legend. We must show the galaxy that he is weak, that his honor is a lie. He stopped at his desk and tapped a datapad. The grand games are approaching. The Festival of Ascension. Yes, Archon, Krell nodded. The planning is underway. Change the program, Xylar ordered. Cancel the beast hunts. Cancel the duels. Xylar smiled, a thin, cruel curving of his lips. We will stage a historical reenactment. The fall of Terra. Krell's eyes widened. The Battle of the Red Soul? But the humans were massacred in that battle. It was a slaughter. Exactly, Xylar purred. We will cast Elias and his little legion as the Terran High Command. We will give them primitive weapons, replicas, and we will cast the Praetorian Guard as the conquering Synod army. And the Praetorians? Krell asked. Will they use replicas? No, Xylar laughed. They will use live ammunition, tanks, gunships. We will recreate the destruction of his homeworld, Krell. We will put him in a scenario he cannot win. He will run, he will beg, and the galaxy will watch their hero die like a rat in the mud. In the corner of the room, hidden in the shadows of a velvet drape, Lady Valeriana stood frozen. She had come to deliver a report on the medical budget. She held the datapad tight against her chest, her heart hammering against her ribs. A slaughter. She looked at her brother. He looked radiant, beautiful, and utterly monstrous. She backed away slowly, inch by inch, until she reached the service door. She slipped out into the corridor, breathless. She leaned against the cool wall, closing her eyes. She saw Elias's face. She felt the phantom touch of his hand on hers. He will die, she thought, unless someone warns him. Valeriana straightened her robes. She composed her face into the mask of the High Healer. She walked toward the turbolift. She wasn't going to the medical wing. She was going to the dungeons. If her brother wanted a history lesson, she would help Elias write a new chapter. Fame in the Synod Empire was a commodity, bought and sold like grain or fuel. And business was booming for the Iron Legion. The upper levels of the Ludus were a stark contrast to the dungeon pits below. Here, the air was scented with jasmine. The walls were lined with silk tapestries. This was the Stable of Stars, where the champions lived. Elias sat on a velvet couch, looking at a datapad. Look at this, Nyx chirped, hopping onto the table. The Salarian tech thief pointed a long, sticky finger at the screen. Your likeness is being licensed for breakfast ration packs. Eat like a saint, fight like a saint. It's ridiculous. They captured my nose profile incorrectly. It's propaganda, Kale grumbled from the corner, where he was methodically polishing his armor. They make us look like cartoons so the people forget we're slaves. Elias set the datapad down. Let them sell the dolls. Let them sell the rations. Every time they put my face on a screen, they remind the people that a human is still standing. The door chimed. Enter, Elias said. Vex, the insectoid Lanista, skittered in. He was followed by a floating drone equipped with holographic recording lenses. Showtime, meet, Vex clicked. This is the galactic feed. Live broadcast to the core worlds. Do not embarrass me. The drone floated in front of Elias. A holographic projection of a reporter appeared, a bubbly, blue-skinned Twi'lek woman with an overly wide smile. And here he is, the reporter squealed. The man who tamed the wolves. The Iron Saint. Tell us, Gladiator, how does it feel to be the most popular killer in the sector? Elias looked into the lens. He didn't smile. He sat forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I am not a killer, Elias said calmly. The reporter blinked, her smile faltering. But you kill for a living. The fans love your brutality. The fans watch because they are hungry, Elias said. Not for blood, but for something real. He looked directly into the camera. He imagined he was speaking not to the nobles and the spires, but to the miners in the deep shafts of Omega. In the arena, it doesn't matter if you are rich or poor, Elias continued. It doesn't matter if you are human, orc, or Salarian. The only thing that matters is the person standing next to you. If you protect them, you survive. If you stand alone, you fall. Vex hissed from the doorway, making a cut-it-out motion with one of his 4 hands. Elias ignored him. The Empire tells you that strength is taking what you want, Elias said, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper. I tell you, strength is giving everything you have to save someone else. The drone's lights flickered. The reporter looked confused but intrigued. A profound philosophy. And will we see this strength at the Grand Games? You will see the truth, Elias said. End transmission. He stood up and walked away from the drone. Vex stormed over, his mandibles clicking furiously. What was that? You are supposed to growl. You are supposed to threaten the competition. You sound like a philosopher. I gave them a good soundbite, Vex, Elias said coolly. It plays well with the demographics. Vex glared at him, then signaled the drone to leave. You are playing a dangerous game, human. The High Archon watches these feeds. Let him watch, Elias said. Later that night, the lights in the suite dimmed. The other gladiators were asleep, Grum snoring loudly enough to shake the walls. Elias stood on the balcony, looking out at the glittering skyline of the capital. The force field hummed, preventing him from jumping, but it didn't block the view. A shadow moved in the corner of the room. Elias spun around, reaching for a weapon he wasn't allowed to carry. Peace, a voice whispered. Lady Valeriana stepped out of the shadows. She wore a dark cloak over her healer's robes, the hood pulled up to hide her distinctive silver hair. How did you get past the guards? Elias asked, relaxing his stance but keeping his distance. I am the High Healer, she said, pulling down her hood. I can go where I please. I told the guards I needed to administer your pre-fight supplements. She walked toward him. She looked pale, frightened. You shouldn't be here, Elias said. If Xylar finds out. He won't, she interrupted. She reached into her cloak and pulled out a small data chip. Elias, the Grand Games, it's a trap. Elias took the chip. I figured as much. What kind of trap? A reenactment, she said, her voice trembling. The fall of Terra. Xylar has cast you as the Terran Defense Force. He is bringing in the Praetorian Guard, tanks, gunships, live ammunition. Elias gripped the railing of the balcony. He wants a public execution. He wants to erase you, Valeriana said. She placed a hand on his arm. He wants to show the galaxy that humanity is weak, that you will break when faced with superior technology. He wants you to run. I don't run, Elias said. You can't fight a tank with a sword, Elias, she pleaded, her eyes searching his. This chip, it contains the schematics of the Coliseum, the maintenance tunnels, the power grid. There are ways to disrupt the arena systems. Elias looked at the chip, then at her. She was risking treason. She was risking death. Why? Elias asked softly. Why save a ghost? Valeriana looked out at the city she ruled but did not control. Because my brother loves the dead, she whispered. He loves statues. He loves history. Because the dead cannot argue. They cannot demand justice. She turned back to him, her violet eyes locking onto his. You make the living hope, Elias. That is more dangerous than any sword. And I cannot bear the thought of watching you die. The distance between them vanished. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was magnetic. Elias reached out, his hand cupping her cheek. Her skin was cool, soft. I won't die, Elias promised. I will turn his history lesson into a revolution. She leaned into his touch for a fleeting second, closing her eyes. Then she pulled away, the mask of the highborn returning. Study the map, she commanded softly. And tomorrow give them hell. She vanished into the shadows as quickly as she had come. Elias stood alone on the balcony. He squeezed the data chip in his hand until the metal bit into his skin. The fall of Terra, he thought. Xylar wants a reenactment? Fine. I'll give him a rewrite. The armory of the Ludus was usually a place of reverence. Warriors respected their steel. But today, it was a place of mockery. The legion stood in a line as the quartermaster tossed bundles of gear at their feet. Suit up, the quartermaster sneered. Historical accuracy is mandatory. Elias picked up a chest plate. It was molded to look like the tactical armor of the Terran vanguard, the same armor he had worn on Ethelgard. But as his fingers brushed the surface, he felt the difference. It wasn't durasteel. It wasn't ceramic composite. It's polymer, Elias said, tapping the chest plate. It made a hollow clack sound. It's plastic. Costume armor. It looks good on camera, the quartermaster shrugged. Cale picked up a battle axe. He tested the edge with his thumb. He pressed down hard. It didn't even break the skin. Blunt, Cale growled, tossing the axe to the floor. A toy. You expect me to fight Praetorians with a toy? You are actors today, beast, the quartermaster spat. Just die on your mark, and you won't need a sharp edge. Grom, the orc, picked up a massive club. It was made of foam-injected rubber, painted to look like iron. Grom roared and snapped it in half with one hand. Garbage. Grom yelled. I will bite their throats out. Enough, Elias said. His voice cut through the anger. He picked up the plastic chest plate. He strapped it on. It felt flimsy, a ghost of the armor he used to wear. He picked up a dull short sword. We don't need their steel, Elias said. We have our own. He looked at his team. They were furious. They were scared. They knew what this meant. Listen to me, Elias said. They are giving us these weapons because they are afraid. If they gave us real steel, they know we would win. He walked down the line. Nix, Elias said. You don't need a sharp knife to hack a control panel. You just need your fingers. Are they sharp? Nix flexed his long, slender fingers. Razor sharp, boss. Jax, Elias looked at the boy. You're a loader. You know how machinery works. You know where the fuel lines are. Yes, Jax nodded, swallowing his fear. Cale. Grom. Click. Elias looked at the heavy hitters. You are the wall. A plastic shield is still a shield if you brace it right. A dull axe is still a hammer if you swing it hard enough. Elias held up the data chip Valeriana had given him, hidden in his palm. We have a map, Elias whispered, leaning in so the cameras wouldn't see. We know where the gas lines run under the sand. We know where the gravity pylons are grounded. He smiled. It was a wolf smile. They want to reenact the fall of Terra? Fine. But they forgot one thing. The Vanguard didn't die because we were weak. We died because we were betrayed. Today, we are the ones setting the trap. The mood in the room shifted. The despair evaporated, replaced by a cold, calculating resolve. They weren't actors being sent to the slaughter. They were saboteurs. That night, they didn't sleep in the plush beds of the upper level. They slept on the floor of the common room, huddled together like a pack. Elias sat awake, sharpening the edge of his dull sword against a piece of stone he had pried from the bathroom wall. Scrape, scrape, scrape. It wouldn't cut armor, but it would cut flesh. Jax curled up next to him. Elias, are we going to die tomorrow? Elias stopped sharpening. He looked at the boy. He looked at the fake armor. Tomorrow is just another day, Jax, Elias said. And the Iron Legion doesn't die on schedule. He looked out the window at the massive silhouette of the Solar Coliseum, lit up by floodlights, waiting for the morning games. Get some sleep, kid, Elias whispered. Tomorrow we make the Emperor bleed. The Solar Coliseum was a canyon of steel and noise. It was the largest structure on the planet, a bowl capable of seating 3 million souls. The stands rose so high they pierced the lower cloud layer, shielded by shimmering energy fields. Elias stood at the great gate. The ground vibrated beneath his boots, not from machinery, but from the stomping of 3 million pairs of feet. Ladies and gentle sentience. The announcer's voice boomed from speakers the size of skyscrapers, echoing like the voice of a god. Today, we celebrate the triumph of order. Today, we witness the final defeat of the savage Terra. The crowd roared, a sound of pure, unadulterated bloodlust, representing the barbaric hordes of Earth. The Iron Legion. The massive bronze gates groaned open. Elias stepped out into the blinding artificial sunlight. The heat was intense, the environmental controls set to scorched earth. Behind him walked the Legion, 12 warriors in total. They wore the flimsy, plastic armor provided by the Game Masters. It was painted a dull, matte green to mock the uniform of the vanguard. They carried dull swords and low-charge rifles. They looked like a joke. They looked like victims. Across the sands, 3 kilometers away, the opposing gates opened. Black smoke poured out. Then came the rumble. And representing the glorious armies of the Synod, the Praetorian Death Squadron, 6 hover chariots burst into the arena. These were not props. They were military-grade skiffs, gleaming in gold and white, their engines screaming. Mounted on the back of each chariot was a heavy plasma repeater. Driving them were elite Praetorian Guards in powered assault armor. "They have tanks," Jax whispered, his voice trembling as he clutched his plastic rifle. "We have toys." "We have a ground," Elias said, tapping the side of his helmet. "Remember the map. Pattern Delta. Into the ruins." The announcer laughed. "Let the history lesson begin." The chariots didn't wait. They accelerated, kicking up rooster tails of sand as they raced toward the cluster of gladiators. "Scatter," Elias ordered. "Move. Move." The Legion broke formation. They sprinted toward the artificial ruins of the cityscape, a maze of concrete walls and broken towers designed to look like a bombed-out human city. The first chariot opened fire. Thwump, thwump, thwump. Bolts of blue plasma tore up the ground where they had been standing seconds before. The sand turned to glass instantly. "Real fire," Kale roared, diving behind a concrete wall. "They are trying to vaporize us." "Draw them in," Elias shouted over the comms. "Get them into the streets. Narrow their firing angles." The Legion vanished into the maze. The chariots slowed down, prowling the perimeter of the ruins like sharks circling a reef. "Flush them out," the lead Praetorian commanded over the stadium loudspeakers. "Burn it all." The chariots began to fire blindly into the buildings. Walls exploded. Debris rained down. The crowd cheered at the destruction. Elias crouched in the basement of a ruined tower with Nyx and Grom. He looked at the Salarian. "Nyx," Elias said. The map showed a fuel pressure valve under the central plaza. "Is it there?" Nyx pulled a panel off the wall, exposing a rusty pipe. He tapped it. "It is a simulation line, running liquid methane for the burning city effect. It is highly pressurized. Can you breach it?" "With this?" Nyx held up his dull knife. "No, but if something heavy hits it." "I'll get you something heavy," Elias said. Elias stood up. He grabbed a red flag from the rubble, a prop meant to represent the Terran banner. He ran out into the open street. "Hey!" Elias screamed at the hovering chariots. He waved the flag. "Is this the best the Empire has? You shoot walls because you are afraid to fight men." The lead chariot swiveled toward him. The gunner laughed, his voice amplified. "Target acquired. Goodbye, barbarian." The chariot revved its engines and charged down the narrow street. It was a tunnel of death. There was nowhere for Elias to run. He stood his ground. He waited. 500 meters. The plasma cannon began to glow, charging up for a kill shot. "Wait," Elias whispered. 300 meters. "Now." Kale. On the rooftops above, Kale and Grom appeared. They pushed a massive stone gargoyle, part of the set decoration, off the ledge. It fell. It didn't hit the chariot. It hit the ground directly in front of the chariot, smashing through the thin crust of the arena floor and exposing the subterranean pipes. The chariot, moving at 200 kilometers an hour, couldn't stop. The pilot screamed as the nose of the skiff dipped into the hole. The chariot flipped. It cartwheeled through the air, crashing upside down into the center of the plaza. Crunch. The fuel cell on the back of the chariot ruptured. The methane line below ruptured. "Fire!" Elias yelled, diving for cover. Jax popped up from a manhole cover and fired a single spark shot from his modified rifle into the leaking gas. Boom! A massive fireball erupted, consuming the chariot and the 2 behind it that were following too closely. The explosion shook the entire stadium. The crowd went silent. The script had just been broken. 3 chariots down. 3 to go. The remaining 3 Praetorians were cautious now. They pulled back, gaining altitude, hovering 50 feet in the air. "They are flying too high," Nyx shouted. "We can't reach them." "They are confused," Elias said, watching the smoke clear. They expected victims. They are facing soldiers. Elias looked at the wall of the arena. He remembered the schematic. The gravity pylons, Elias pointed. They keep the chariots afloat. If we disrupt the local field, they drop. I need a clear shot at the coupling, Jack said. But it's shielded. Elias looked at the wreckage of the first chariot. The Praetorian Guard was crawling out of the fire, his power armor smoking. He had dropped his weapon, a heavy, military-grade railgun. Elias sprinted. He slid across the burning sand, the heat blistering his skin through the plastic armor. He grabbed the railgun. It was heavy, real steel, real power. He rolled onto his back and aimed at the blue glowing coupling on the arena wall. Cover me. The remaining chariots saw him. They opened fire. Plasma splashed around him. Elias took a breath. He ignored the fire. He ignored the crowd. He squeezed the trigger. Crack. The railgun slug slammed into the gravity coupling. The blue light flickered and died. The anti-gravity field in that sector collapsed. The three chariots, suddenly subjected to normal physics, dropped like stones. They smashed into the arena floor, their suspensions shattering. They're grounded. Kale laughed, leaping from the roof. Legion. Charge. It was a brawl now. The Praetorian pilots climbed out of their wrecked vehicles, drawing energy swords. They were 7 feet tall in powered armor. But the Legion swarmed them. Grom used his massive shield to pin a Praetorian against a wall, while Click used his 4 blades to sever the armor's hydraulic lines. Kale tackled another, using his claws to rip the helmet sensors off. Elias walked toward the commander of the Praetorians. The gold-armored giant swung a massive energy hammer. Elias ducked, the heat of the weapon singing his air. He didn't block. He stepped inside the guard. He jammed the barrel of the rail gun into the joint of the Praetorian's knee and fired. The leg blew apart. The giant fell. Elias stood over him. He aimed the rail gun at the Praetorian's helmet. Yield, Elias ordered. The Praetorian looked up, stunned. Slaves do not demand terms. Soldiers do, Elias said. Yield, or I finish the history lesson. The Praetorian dropped his hammer. Silence descended on the Coliseum. The smoke cleared. The Golden Army was a wreck of burning metal and broken bodies. The barbarians were standing tall, battered but unbroken. Elias climbed onto the wreckage of a lead chariot. He looked up at the Emperor's box. He raised the railgun. Are you entertained? Elias bellowed, his voice amplified by the silence of millions. Is this the history you wanted? High above, in the VIP box, Archon Xylar trembled. His hands gripped the railing until the metal bent. This was a disaster. The broadcast was going out to 1,000 worlds. The inferior humans had just humiliated the Empire's elite using garbage and grit. Kill him, Xylar whispered to General Krell. Send the drones. Vaporize the grid. We cannot, Archon, Krell said, looking at the readouts. The crowd looked at the crowd. Xylar looked. The crowd wasn't booing. They were standing. They were stomping. Thump, thump, thump. Iron Saint, Iron Saint, Iron Saint. They loved a winner. They loved strength. And this gladiator had just shown more strength than any in living memory. He mocks me, Xylar hissed. I will do it myself. I will go down there. I will expose him as a fraud. I will make him kneel. Xylar grabbed his ceremonial energy spear. He activated his personal gravity lift. The great lift descended into the arena. A spotlight hit the center of the sands. Archon Xylar stepped off the platform. He looked magnificent in his gold armor, his violet cape billowing in the artificial wind. He floated inches above the bloodstained sand. He approached the wreckage. You fight well for a slave, Xylar's voice boomed over the speakers. But you are nothing, a nameless piece of meat. You use tricks to defeat my guards, but you cannot defeat a god. Elias jumped down from the chariot. He tossed the railgun aside. He walked to meet the Archon. The Legion formed a semicircle behind him, weapons ready. Kneel, Xylar commanded, pointing the spear at Elias's throat. Remove your helmet. Let them see the fear in your eyes before I end you. Elias stood motionless. I said kneel. Xylar shouted, his composure cracking. Elias reached up. He unclasped the seal of his helmet. Hissing air escaped. He lifted the battered, green-painted helmet from his head. He let it drop into the sand. He shook his hair out. It was gray at the temples, matted with sweat. He looked directly into the camera drone hovering nearby. Then he looked at Xylar. The Archon's golden eyes went wide. He took a step back, his boot touching the sand for the first time. "You," Xylar whispered, his voice trembling. "You are dead. I killed you at Ethelgard." Elias took a breath. He spoke not to Xylar, but to the galaxy. "My name is Commander Elias Thorne," he said. His voice was calm, deep, and unbreakable. "I am the commander of the Terran Vanguard. I served the Coalition for 20 years. He took a step toward Xylar. Xylar stepped back again. "I was betrayed by this man." Elias pointed a scarred finger at the Archon. "He bombarded his own troops to hide his crimes. He sold me into slavery to silence the truth." A gasp went through the crowd. 3 million people held their breath. The lie had been shattered. "But I am not dead," Elias roared, his voice rising to a crescendo. "And humanity is not weak. We do not break. We do not bow." He turned to the crowd, raising his arms. "I am Elias Thorne, and I will have my vengeance, in this life or the next." The silence stretched for a heartbeat. It hung there, fragile as glass. Then a single voice from the upper stands, a human voice, screamed, "Hail Thorne." Then another, "Hail Thorne." Then the dam broke. Thorne, Thorne, Thorne. It was deafening. The slaves in the pits were cheering. The common citizens were cheering. Even some of the nobility were clapping. The sound was a physical force, a tidal wave of rebellion. Xylar looked around, panic rising in his chest. He saw the way the crowd looked at Elias. He saw the way his own guards were hesitating. He realized he couldn't kill him. Not now. If he struck Thorne down while the crowd chanted his name, he would create a martyr. He would spark a civil war instantly. Xylar lowered his spear. His face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. "Guards!" Xylar shrieked, his voice cracking. "Arrest him. Arrest them all. They are traitors to the crown. Return them to the dungeon." Reinforcements flooded the arena, hundreds of riot troopers. They surrounded the legion. Kale raised his claws, ready to fight and die. "Stand down, Kale," Elias ordered softly. "But Commander." "We have won," Elias said, looking at the crowd. "Look at them. They know the truth now." Elias dropped his sword. He held out his hands for the cuffs. As the guards dragged him away, Elias looked up at the VIP box one last time. Behind the glass, he saw Lady Valeriana. She was pressing her hand against the pane, tears streaming down her face. She nodded once. "The spark is lit." Elias smiled as they shoved him toward the darkness of the cells. "You can put me in a cage, Xylar," Elias whispered into the dark. "But you can't put the fire back in the bottle."